Welcome to Standing Firm's Workplace Violence Policy Best Practices Briefing. My name is Susan DiGregorio, and I'm Standing Firm's Employer Services Coordinator. Today's briefing is approximately 15 minutes long. So let's get started. Before we jump into the content of today's session, just a quick note regarding terminology. We will be using partner violence in reference to the physical, sexual, financial, or psychological harm by a current or former intimate partner or spouse. Domestic violence is the more widely recognized term for this behavior. However, it continues to fuel the perception that this is a personal issue that occurs in the home and stays in the home, and that it occurs between a husband and a wife. However, when victims of partner violence or perpetrators of partner violence are employed, it does affect an individual's work behavior, performance, and the workplace as a whole. It is not something that people leave at home when they come to work. It follows them. The workplace and partner violence become entangled because the perpetrator exerts control over the victim's entire life at home and at work. In addition, it's not just between husbands and wives. It occurs between intimate partners, same-sex couples, and separated or divorced parties. So we use the term partner violence to reflect these realities. However, when you're writing your policy, it's in your discretion to use the descriptor that best fits your organization's culture and aligns with references in other policies and procedures that your organization has adopted. The objectives for this briefing are twofold. We want to spend some time discussing the approaches employers have adopted to implementing a partner violence policy. Many organizations have chosen to embed partner violence policy language in a broader workplace violence policy, whereas others have opted for a completely separate partner violence policy. Either approach works, as long as the key provisions of an effective partner violence policy are included. Then we will highlight the primary elements of a partner violence policy. Occupational health researchers have identified 4 types of workplace violence, and recently a 5th has been added: ideological violence. Partner violence policy provisions are aimed at addressing workplace violence where the perpetrator usually does not have a relationship with the business, but has a personal relationship with the intended victim. We say usually because in some instances, the perpetrator is known in the workplace. And it's important to note that according to the Department of Labor, 27% of workplace violence events have roots in partner violence. This type of incident is frequent because the abuser knows exactly where his or her victim will be during work hours. This framework helps to explain why some employers choose to embed their partner violence policy provisions within the framework of a broader workplace violence policy. However, if you choose this approach, you must recognize that an effective response to partner violence differs from effective responses to other types of workplace violence. The provisions of an effective partner violence policy not only speak to actions that need to be taken if there's a risk to the workplace, but it clearly outlines the organization's commitment to provide support to an employee experiencing partner violence. In other words, it recognizes the potential of a workplace violence incident stemming from partner violence, and it recognizes the value of employees who are surviving partner violence to the organization and the support that is necessary to assist them in continuing to be a productive employee. An effective policy should also address how the employer will respond to employees who are perpetrators of partner violence. A partner violence policy is successful if it establishes a culture where partner violence is acknowledged by the employer as a potential issue for employees and creates an environment where employees are comfortable disclosing that they are a victim of partner violence or that they are concerned about a coworker. Therefore, the goals of an effective partner violence policy should include raising awareness and mitigating the risk of partner violence from affecting the workplace, and creating a supportive and safe work environment for employee victims of partner violence and their coworkers. As you can see, there are 8 primary elements of a partner violence policy. During the remainder of this session, we're going to speak specifically to a statement of confidentiality, reporting and referrals, training and resources, and the employer response. As noted, a primary goal of a partner violence policy is to create a culture where employees who are victims are open to disclosing their situation. If an employee does not disclose, we cannot ensure the safety of the workplace or support the employee. A victim may not seek help or disclose for many reasons, including the complex impact trauma has on individuals and the sheer fear of the situation they are in. They may also fear attacks on their credibility because victims often become convinced by their abusers that nobody believes them. They may fear losing their job, and they may not disclose or seek help because they don't want to be judged and go from coworker to victim in the eyes of others. This is why confidentiality of information is critical. Therefore, a key element of an effective partner violence policy is a statement of confidentiality. The policy in this regard also serves the purpose as a communication to employees that the organization is making a commitment to ensure the confidentiality of information that is shared. There are, however, exceptions to the statement of confidentiality. So while the policy needs to stress the importance of confidentiality, it must also be clear when information will be disclosed. For example, if there's a safety risk or disclosure is required by law or policy. The policy should state that if possible, the employer will try to notify the victim before information is disclosed in terms of who it will be disclosed to and what will be disclosed. And a clear statement should be included that others receiving this information will be required to treat the information as privileged, and there will be consequences for a breach of this privilege. For the reporting and referral section of the policy, action steps need to be provided for both employees experiencing partner violence and employees who have information about a victim or perpetrator of partner violence. For employees in both these situations, the policy should designate a specific person, team, or department as the primary resource for reporting. It also needs to state that there will be no retaliation for disclosing or reporting. As we have discussed, a primary goal of a partner violence policy is to create a culture where self-disclosure is encouraged, as is self-reporting by coworkers of concerns or behaviors they have witnessed. So if you're embedding your partner violence policy provisions within a broader workplace violence policy, make sure you assess any mandated reporting requirements in the broader policy and how they would apply in a partner violence situation. An effective policy will include a commitment from the employer to provide the necessary training to support implementation of the policy, as well as ongoing training updates and just-in-time resources. While some policies may be effectively rolled out via email alone, Standing Firm's experience is that training, in-person, webinar, and web-based, is the best practice when implementing a partner violence policy due to the nature of the issue it's designed to address. The training content will vary by audience, as different groups within the organization will have different responsibilities as it relates to the policy. In addition, the training requirements and methods used to train will vary by audience based on logistics, such as location, or precedent in terms of how your organization typically implements policies and trains employee groups. And finally, critical to training is ensuring people are aware of the internal and external resources that are available to assist individuals who are potential victims or perpetrators of partner violence. Therefore, these resources need to be clearly identified and accessible prior to any training. The employer response section of the policy outlines what options are available to an employee who may be a victim of partner violence. The policy will state the extent to which leave and reasonable accommodations will be made for a victim. It will outline the steps that will be taken if creating a workplace safety plan is a necessary step, and identify what an employer will do if they are listed as a place the perpetrator is not to come under a protection from abuse order. It will acknowledge potential necessary changes to employee benefits, as well as how to access unemployment insurance if the victim is unable to stay employed with the organization. And it will speak to work performance. With or without accommodations, the employer can expect that the individual perform the duties of his or her job. A partner violence policy also needs to address employees who are perpetrators of partner violence and may be misusing company resources to carry out the abuse. An organization's partner violence policy needs to define those activities by perpetrators that it will not tolerate and their inconsistency within a broader code of conduct the employer expects of all employees as a condition of their employment. If an employee is perpetrating partner violence in the workplace against another person and it is reported, then the partner violence policy should spell out the steps the organization will take to address the situation. This includes appropriate investigations upon receiving a report, a duty to cooperate from other employees who may be witnesses, what burden of proof will be required to determine if the employee did or did not perpetrate violence, what the disciplinary actions will be for someone who is found to have perpetrated partner violence, and if the organization will require employees who've been named in protection from abuse orders or restraining orders to provide these to the employer. Is a zero-tolerance approach a good idea? Immediate termination upon a validated report? There can be unintended consequences of a zero-tolerance policy. For example, a victim may become a focus of blame and punishment if the perpetrator is fired. For some perpetrators, job-related stress increases the likelihood of partner violence, and the loss of a job can cause a perpetrator to reoffend. Therefore, whether or not to adopt a zero-tolerance policy warrants that employers consider this provision when developing the policy to ensure full vetting of the issues before landing on your organization's approach. There are additional considerations even after your policy has been finalized that you will need to keep in mind when it comes to the administration of your policy. If you do business across state lines, make sure you reference state and local laws regarding workplace protections specific to partner violence, as well as local resources for employees in those locations. For example, New York just passed a law to protect partner violence victims from employment discrimination, which is effective November 18th of 2019, and it applies to all employers with 4 or more employees. If you're required to comply with the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, and offer employees violence-related leave, care needs to be taken in coordinating these 2 elements of leave available to employees. For example, the effects of partner violence, such as depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder, may rise to the level of a serious health condition under FMLA. Obviously, if you have unions in your workforce, you will need to determine what level of discussion or negotiation is necessary to implement a partner violence policy. And there may be some special considerations if the employee who discloses they are a victim of partner violence is disabled. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against employees who are disabled, and an employee's lawyer could argue that being a chronic victim of partner violence constitutes a disability. In general, make sure you integrate and coordinate your partner violence policy with other workplace policies as appropriate. Thank you again for participating in today's briefing. To review some key takeaways from today's session, you don't want to be in a reactionary mode when partner violence comes to the workplace. A response plan is necessary. And a partner violence policy is the first step. It creates a culture where employees can access support and safety is a priority. However, The policy is only as successful as the procedures which support the policy implementation and administration. If your organization is a premier member of Standing Firm, you can access our Model Partner Violence Policy on our website, www.standingfirmswpa.org, and log into the member portal. If you have any questions or need additional information, don't hesitate to contact us via our website. Thank you again for your participation.